Welcome to Comedy 101, The Fundamentals, brought to you by Laughing Skull Lounge. We have classes that you can sign up for at standupclasses.com. The purpose of this video is to give you the fundamentals about comedy, what we've learned in the years we've been in business, and so that you can take these rules and mess them up however you wish. So with that said, let me tell you this. In comedy, there are no rules. With that said, let's go over the first rule. The first rule is do not steal other people's material. If you find a bit online or at an open mic, excuse me, or whatever, that's worth lifting, then chances are that's going to be circulated on video or whatever at one point, a meme, anything, and you'll get caught. If it's worth stealing, it's worth getting caught. You're going to get caught for it. So don't steal it. The purpose of stand-up comedy is to express yourself and find yourself on stage while being honest and true to yourself and connecting with an audience. So when you steal other people's material, that's not art. That's just being a performer. Old school days, they used to start off stealing other people's material. That was very common. That's how you did it. But nowadays, don't do it. Don't steal other people's material. Another rule is if you're going to be doing stand-up comedy, I'm a big believer that you can talk about anything you want on stage as long as you're not malicious. Like white guys can tell race-based jokes as long as you're not being malicious, and that's what it's all about. Because really, if you're not being malicious and, you can be truthful all day long, that's exactly what you should be doing. So if you are a dick, then it's going to come out and you're going to have a hard time. But I'm a big believer that you want people to like you. You want, and it's not like you're pleasing the audience, but you want to be a good person, in my opinion. And, there are a lot of people out there that are angry and da-da. Even Lewis Black that complains, and that's his character, is still likable. Even the guy, if you're just pissing people off, the chances of them wanting to come buy tickets and see you in the future are very slim. So as Johnny Carson said, if people like you, then you've won 80% of the battle. And I myself actually started off not likable on stage. And I'm coming from experience with this information. So again, this is my personal experience. Take with it, use whatever you want. You can completely contradict me on this or all, but whatever. Here's my story. When I first started off, I wasn't very likable. I used to get on stage and I was right and the audience was wrong and I had my religious and political views and blah, blah, blah. And then I just realized I didn't want to be arguing with people after the shows. I didn't want to be pissing people off. I didn't dream of being a stand-up comedian at age 7 so that I could, argue with people. I want to make people happy. I want to make people laugh. So that's what I started working on myself off stage and became better on stage. And one of my greatest compliments came from a comedian named Stuart Huff, who said, "Marshall, you're the only comedian I know that's ever gone from unlikable to likable on stage." And it was a big compliment. He wasn't being a dick. He was being honest. And so, flatteringly, I hope I am likable on stage. But what I came up with during that period of discovery is a formula for likability. And that is confidence plus humility equals likability. If you meet somebody that's overly confident but not humble, which is what I was when I first started out, that's not likable. If you find somebody that's really humble but not confident, that's not likable either. So you got to have confidence plus humility, and that's equal likability. So the secret to comedy is surprise. Aristotle came up with that. That's why when somebody hears a joke for a second time, it doesn't work as well. Now, that is excluding comedians like Jim Gaffigan, who people are paying money just to hear the Hot Pocket bit again because it's so solid. At one point, for comedians, they become rock stars. Like Andrew Dice Clay was one of the first comedians I ever saw at a huge arena. And everybody went there to hear the exact jokes that you were repeating to your friends for weeks before going to the show. So ultimately, though, when it comes to comedy, the trick is for surprise. And the easiest form of surprise is misdirection. Misdirection is very common in our world. Magicians do it a lot. They make you pay attention to the left hand while they manipulate the situation with the right hand, all while disappointing their parents. So misdirection is real common. It makes you make people think you're taking them down one path, and then all of a sudden you take a different path, and it works. For example, Giving 110% takes hard work, dedication, and a complete disregard for math. Notice that hard work and dedication makes you think I'm taking you down one path. But then when I say disregard for math, it's a surprise ending. You didn't think I was going to do that. I was probably going to go with hard work, dedication, putting in the late hours, sacrifice. No, I went in with making fun of the fact that 110% is bad math or not logical math. It's just a hype number, historically. But if you notice, the beginning of the trail works for the projected direction as well as the surprise direction. Excuse me. For example, that joke would not have worked if it was giving 110% takes hard work, dedication, and knowing how to salmon fish. Salmon fishing has nothing to do with 110% or the beginning of the trail, i.e. joke. Easiest form of misdirection is the rule of three. There are tons of different ways to do rule of three. The easiest form is to go serious, serious, funny. The first two things are serious, the third is funny. Like example of that joke that I just did. Giving 110% takes hard work, dedication, serious, serious, and a complete disregard for math, funny, or how math works. Another common, once you get good at this, is funny, funnier, funniest. Once you've been doing comedy writing for a while, you should be able to come up with that and make it good. But starting off, the easiest is serious, serious, funny. Here's a typical joke structure. Premise, setup, punchline, tag, act out, callback. The premise is a broad description that gets the audience in their head where you're taking them, points them in the right direction. The setup gets more specific to that description that you just gave, and the punchline is a surprise. A tag is just another punchline, another surprise. And then you can be very physical on stage and act out the punchline and or the tag. And then if later on in your set you reference your punchline or tag or act out, that is what's called a callback. So, that's very common. Get or done as a tagline. It's not so much a callback, but it is kind of a callback. But I think you understand what I'm saying here. I'm going to give an example. One of my jokes I wrote when I first started, and I still do it for the most part. Anyways, the premise is, like most comedians, I grew up really poor. The setup. But we didn't know we were poor because my mom was always lying to us about it. I remember one Christmas she tried to tell my sisters that she'd given them dolls, the punchline, but it was really just empty bottles of Mrs. Butterworth, the tag. And then she was like, no, that's Kitchen Barbie. That could also be an act out because I'm acting out my mom saying that. But that gives you an idea. We go from broad, I grew up poor, to more narrow. We're going to talk about how my mom lied to me about being poor and what she did to my sisters on Christmas through being lying about being poor. And then Mrs. Butterworth is the surprise. And that works because Mrs. Butterworth is also, you imagine it as an empty, it could be a doll, because it looks like it's a shape of a woman. Now, Jerry Seinfeld said, the trick to surprise really is the gap between premise and punchline. If the launch is too close to the landing, it's too close, it's too simple of a joke, nobody's going to laugh at like that, haha, I saw that coming a million miles away. If the landing is too far away from the launch, then people aren't going to get it. It has to be the exact measurement. That's the real art form is. Something I just realized that I did not put in this presentation, but I'll share with you now, is that gap, that perfect gap, I actually consider to be what we know as the subconscious, conscious mind as the known unknown or the unknown known. It's like, that's why when sometimes you hear a comedian say something and you're like, damn it, I've been thinking that, I just didn't know the words to say it. That's the unknown known or the known unknown, however it is. And also, talking, referencing something that is not referenced 1,000 times in the past. Something that's, I've seen that too. It's just, that is really the trick, in my opinion, of finding that right gap is dipping in and tapping into the unknown knowns, or the known unknowns, which is kind of the subconscious consciousness, if you will. All right, enough of the hippy dippy. Let's keep moving forward. Another trick is you want to put your punch word at the end, as close as possible. The Mrs. Butterworth joke would not have worked if Mrs. Butterworth was set up front. It's the surprise word. So if it was My mom used to give my sisters empty bottles of Mrs. Butterworth because we were poor and it was Christmas time, so she just told them it was dolls. It doesn't work as well. The surprise word has to be the very last word you say, and also don't say it in the premise. It's the first time you say that surprise word has to be in the punchline and at the very end. And if it's not the last word, the second or third to last word is okay. Like, for example, that one three rule of three that I shared with you is giving 110% takes hard work, dedication, and a complete disregard for how math works. For a while, I was saying disregard for math, but it was a little confusing in people's minds. Just a little bit more specification would be how math works. So math is the second to last word towards in the surprise and in the joke. And speaking of the punchline, you want to sell the punchline. Too many comedians bury the punchline out of insecurity, typically, in my opinion, because you don't know if it's going to work and you don't really feel it. And you're like, oh, whatever, I can't believe I'm saying this. But you've got to sell it. It's very important that you sell your punchline. You're doing a lot of work to get to it. Enjoy it, sell it, and make it work for you. And there's lots of ways to sell that. One of the ways that, when you're going to be on stage, I once heard a great saying, if you're not going to be funny, be interesting. And that means that whatever you're talking about has the audience so compelled that they're dead silent and they're paying attention to every word you say. You're a performer. You've got an audience on the edge of their seat. Fantastic. The more interesting you are without funny, the bigger the punch has to be, the bigger the funny has to be. If it's interesting, funny, interesting, funny. If it's interesting, 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 then it has to be funny to the square root of 3 or whatever. So again, it's okay not to get laughs as long as they're paying attention, because remember, you are a performer. Also, I'm a big believer in the truth. The truth is funny. Now, in comedy, it's usually 80% truth and 20% lie. So 80% truth is your truth. The 20% is the surprise, if you will. Yes, I did grow up poor. Yes, my mom did lie to me about it and has tried to, make excuses later in life. And yeah, granted, I'm not poor. We weren't poor like, Dominican Republic poor. But still, and no, she did not give my sisters empty bottles of Mrs. Butterworth. So that's a surprise. So when it comes to finding the funny and being funny, I highly recommend sticking with the truth. One of my favorite sayings in comedy is everything's been done except for your life. So write from your life, write from your truth. And that's where you can really find the funny and authenticity, which is very appealing to people when they find authentic individuals. I'm a big believer that one of my favorite sayings in life is when you shine a light on a dark place, it is no longer dark. So yeah, so your truths might have some deep-seated, psyche, drama or whatever. But the more you tell the truth and shine a light on the dark place, the less dark it is. And the funnier is Christopher Titus is one of my favorite comedians, and he was known for taking dark subject matter like his mother's suicide and writing jokes about it that the audience laughed at. Amy Schumer is one of the best comedians and biggest comedians out today, and she really focuses on being truthful, and that's where it comes from. And and she's very honest. So, and I've seen other comedians, but I've been in the game for 15 years now, and when I've seen some comedians go from just part of the pack to standing out, it's when they really start talking about some truths. So when you shine a light on a dark place, it's no longer dark. Here's a big amateur mistake. Don't ask the audience questions. Asking the audience questions is asking for permission. Hey man, who all here works 9 to 5? Hey, who all's got kids? Hey, anybody know, any of that bullshit questioning is basically saying, accept me. You're there to perform. And so be you. And, if you're going to talk about being poor, you don't say, hey, anybody else here grew up poor? Well, I grew up poor, and let me tell you, my mom used to lie to me about it. No, be you, and don't ask the audience questions like that. Just go. And also, when you start asking the questions like that of the audience, it makes them think that it's acceptable to talk back to the stage, and it's not. We're performing up there on stage, just like you never go to the Fox Theater to see a play and people are yelling, "Don't open the door! Don't open!" It's just bullshit. So don't want to get interacting with the audience like that, because then it trains audience members to think, "Oh, well, last time the comedian said I could talk to him." No, fuck that. Don't do it. So don't ask the audience questions. Big part about being funny is brevity. Brevity is a soul of wit by William Shakespeare. You want to say as few words as possible. One of my favorite sayings about brevity is, if I had written less, if I had more time, I would have written less. That's basically what it means. Brevity takes work. It's like you don't ever write a book, you edit a book. You just dump everything out and then you come back and edit. So brevity takes more work. Do the work to find the brevity. Big trick on the flip side of the same coin of brevity is what I call breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs help you lead your audience. Have you ever heard somebody tell a joke and nobody laughs? Excuse me. And at the end they go, "Oh, I forgot to tell you the guy was a doctor." Well, guess what? The doctor was a very important breadcrumb. Now, you don't want to have too many breadcrumbs. You want to have just the right amount of breadcrumbs that help lead your audience. Remember, brevity and breadcrumbs. Make sure you drop the right breadcrumbs, but not too much and not too little to make it work. For example, when one of my most common jokes I tell on stage when I start on stage, my shows these days is, "I am married with 2 kids, which means I'm very happy to be here." Notice I don't tell you my kids' names or their ages or how long I've been married or who my wife is or how we met. It's just that you need to know the breadcrumbs. Married, 2 kids. Misdirection here as well, because you think, oh, father guys in public is going to have to say something positive about his kids. But, obviously being in a stand-up comedy club is you're not surprised, but are surprised when you say, which means I'm very happy to be here. Misdirection there of like, haha, I don't like being married with 2 kids, but I do. It's a great life. I highly recommend it. One of my favorite comedians is a guy named Mitch Hedberg. I got to work with him a few times, and look at this brevity. He was great for one-liner jokes, and he's, in my opinion, one of the best ever. One of his most popular jokes is, "This shirt is dry clean only," which means it's dirty. The punch word is dirty. It's not to say this shirt is dirty, and the reason why it's dirty is because it's dry clean only. Again, it's brevity is the soul of wit, and if you want to see some other great one-liner jokes, I'd suggest looking up Mitch Hedberg. Another trick in comedy is to use words that have hard consonants because they stick in the ear better. Words like p, t, k, and pants is funnier than jeans. And there's a great, there's a Simpsons episode that I saw one time where Krusty the Clown, notice the 2K word sounds, Krusty the Clown, lots of hard consonants in his name, had a scarf wrapped around his neck. And Lisa said, "Hey, what's wrong with Krusty's throat?" And somebody said, "Oh, he hurt his throat using a punchline with too many hard consonants in it." So when you're looking for words to use, I suggest using words with hard consonants if you can get away with it, if you can make it work, because that is going to stick in the ear better and get a better reaction from people. Also, you want to look at your set like a bank account. You want to keep it positive. So you want to start with a good joke, and then you want to end with a great joke. So if you're going to do 2 jokes up front that are negative, they don't get laughs, you're starting off in a negative bank account. That means you've got to tell 2 jokes that are positive before people start laughing. So that's why it's very important to start off with jokes that you know are going to work, or your best jokes that you're going to work. Because then if you sandwich a new joke in between 2 jokes that you know work, if it's a negative, that's fine. You're still positive and you get it positive right back again. So looking at your set list like a bank account, you want to always keep it positive. And on the same tip, the whole show has to stay on a positive balance. Like if you have 3 comedians that go up and eat it in front of the audience, the 4th guy has a huge hole to dig out of. So that's why it's not uncommon if someone really ate it in front of a comedian that knows what they're doing. That comedian takes the first minute or so to rag on how bad that comic did, so that way he's getting the audience back to 0 and getting them on them side and making that emotional connection. You want to make an emotional connection with the audience early. That's part of likability as well. Get that emotional connection early. If you notice the beginning joke of mine, I'm telling you about me, that I'm married with 2 kids. The first things I say is that, and then I make a joke about it. So I once heard the advice, if you can make jokes about yourself right up front, it's telling the audience about you, it's getting a laugh right up front, it's showing some humility, it's some self-deprecating, and it's getting that emotional connection with the audience right up front. So when you're putting together your set list, You want to put your jokes structure is suggested like this. Start off with your funniest joke, end with your second funniest joke. Your third funniest joke should be your second one, your fourth funniest, second to last, and actually this should say your fifth funniest joke should be third. But I think you see the structure here of how you do this. So that's the suggested set list structure. Do with it as you will. Not everybody stays with this. I don't stay with this. But that, when you're starting out, that's is a good rule to just, you want to have some kind of idea what you're going to talk about in there. Now, also, let me give you a suggestion on how to remember your set list. Whatever the subject is of the first joke, let's say that it's cars, and then the second joke is, say, Clinton, and the third joke is about, let's say it's about trees, and then the fourth joke is about tables. Span this out a little bit. Believe me, this has a purpose. And then the last joke that you're going to talk about, the subject is money. What you want to do is you want to write a sentence in your mind with the keywords of cars, Clinton, trees, tables, money. A lot of times when I buy cars, it's usually from Hillary Clinton. She usually has them hanging from trees while atop of tables filled with money. So now I've given this image in my head with the sentence of cars hanging next to Hillary Clinton and trees with tables underneath them filled with money. You could use that as an image that you have in your head, or you can even write the sentence accordingly. Like a lot of times when I'm in cars, I always see Hillary Clinton sitting by underneath trees with tables in front of her filled with money. And now you've memorized that sentence, and now you know the structure of your subjects for your set list. And then let's say in the first joke, the cars are seats and gear shifter and brakes. Well, then you write you write a sentence with brakes and gear shifters and what have you in the order it goes. So that's how you can remember your set list. Little trick there. And the fun thing about putting together your set list and your jokes is look at it like a puzzle. You're putting together a puzzle about yourself. I once heard a great saying. Tom Papa is one of Jerry Seinfeld's best friends, and he's a great comedian. And a show on TV. It was actually the only show the first show that Jerry Seinfeld produced when he got back into television from Seinfeld was The Marriage Counselor, starring Tom Papa, our marriage referee. And so anyways, they were good friends, and the story goes that one morning, Tom Papa's over at Jerry Seinfeld's house, and he's doing the New York Times crossword puzzle. And Seinfeld's like, "What? A comedian doing a crossword puzzle? Your act is a puzzle. Figure that out." So, now that's advice from Jerry Seinfeld, a guy that writes every single day. A little FYI, he has a calendar, and every day that he writes, he puts a red X on that calendar, a print calendar. He's old school, and that way he can see how many days in a row he's writing, even at that level. And again, you don't get to that level without writing like that anyways. You don't get to the NFL as a professional football player by, just doing the minimum or, not doing the extra work. You don't get to the NBA without doing the extra work. Michael Jordan was one of the best ever, if not the best ever. And his whole argument was first on the court, last off the court. And so do the work. If you're going to be on that level, do the work and put your puzzle together about yourself and about your life. It's very rewarding on many levels. So with that said, let me also tell you some types of jokes. This is very abbreviated. I just want to give you an idea of the different types of jokes that people write and that you can start off writing with. Misdirection, we already went over that. Making people think you're taking them down one path, but then it's a surprise turn. The rule of three, we also went over that. Serious, funny. Another type of rule of three is lists, where you just list off a bunch of things, and audience members will give you credit if you can list off like 10 amazing things rapidly. Dennis Miller is famous for that. So, list another type of rule of three and just keeping it funny and interesting. The pun, a lot of people do puns. I'm reading a book about anti-gravity. It's impossible to put down. Bam. And so there's that one. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying it exists. Using the exact meaning of the words as literal, you can't be serious. Surely you can't be serious. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. And also notice again, if you just didn't have the word Shirley in the beginning, you can't be serious. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. Now that does have the surprise word in the first part of the joke, the premise, but that's part of the surprise. That's what makes the match. Exaggeration, taking something in an excessive manner. It was so cold, polar bears were wearing jackets. Similes, comparing similar two different items. This is actually a good way to talk about juxtaposition. That's really gets a lot of laughs when, two things are put together that normally don't go together, but somehow you've made it make sense. Again, the known unknown. Like if you can talk about how I see driving in traffic this way, and now it's a juxtaposition. It's like, oh, I've never thought about that, but it does go together if you look at it from that angle. Boom, boom, boom. Sarcasm, being sharp and bitter. Money isn't everything in life, but it does keep you in touch with your children. Now, a big factor about delivery. One thing I did not put in here was when I was talking about Mitch Hedberg's joke, this shirt is dry clean only, which means it's dirty. Pause. Pauses are very important in delivery because that gives your audience a chance to process what you're saying as well as go down the wrong path or write their own punchline, and then you give them surprise, and just kind of keeping it rhythmic is key as well. So pauses are very much in there. But biggest thing about delivery is either you own the stage or the stage owns you. You have to be confident. If you're weak, the audience smells it and they're going to not respect you, and they're not going to have that emotional connection with you, and which is not what you want. Little trick. There's been a lot of research by Harvard. That's research that's been released lately by Harvard studies that show that you can fake it until you make it when it comes to your body chemistry. They've taken all these tests between people that are base level, have certain hormones or testosterone or what have you, and then they give them a series of stuff where they build their confidence, and their testosterone goes up right away from that. And so one of the easiest ways to build your confidence before getting on stage is to put in a power stance for 2 minutes, and then your chemicals in your body transform, raise more testosterone, and give you more confidence as a presenter. Pretty crazy to know that, but it works. There's Harvard research behind it. Try it. It works, and not just for stand-up, but if you got to, going into a meeting or anything like that, would be good too. Another way I like to prepare before getting on stage is meditating and trying to get as calm on the inside as possible. So like if I do power stances, and then I focus on my breath, and feeling the energy and building myself up. I don't think about any jokes because I don't want to, pollute what I'm actually, being in the moment. I know what I've got the same set of jokes that I can start off with, and then I can throw in new things as I see fit. But that's a good way to get started, prepare just before they announce your name on stage. Just make sure that you're kind of doing it where people can't see you. Another piece of advice is go twice as slow as you think you're going. A lot of people go really fast on stage, and then when you watch this tape, you're like, "Oh wow, I thought I was going much slower than that." So go twice as slow as you think you're going. Trust me, especially when you're a new comedian, that's a big factor for you. Also, don't step on your laughs. You have taken a lot of time and energy to get these jokes written and getting on this show and going down there and waiting your turn. And then getting on stage and getting out there and getting the laugh. Don't step on it. Let it sizzle. Jeff Garland once gave me the advice that you want to let your joke sizzle. So get those laughs. Wait till those laughs start petering out, and then start your next joke. Movement on stage is very good. Chris Rock is known for being a comedian that moves up and down the stage. And what he does when he's getting ready for a special is he goes around the country and performs at comedy clubs. And when he has a new joke, he just stands at the microphone and tells the joke and lets the joke by itself work. And if the joke works, then he starts moving on it. Then he starts throwing his emphasis on it because the joke is funny enough. Now the sugar and the spice on the cake is going to make it even, really, really great. And also the movement is good because humans are animals, and we're hunters. So when things move, our eyes are attracted to it. Not to say that people that don't have a lot of movement, like Stephen Wright, or even Mitch Hedberg, they still have movement. So movement is important, and a good trick is it's okay to kind of move up and down the stage. Just make sure you stay in the spotlight. Silence is okay. again, like I said earlier, you can have silence, and as long as the audience is paying attention. So when you hear silence, don't start getting in your head, unless it was just after the punchline and nobody's laughing. Then be in the moment and make a joke about that. I once got another piece of advice that said if you're not, well, not piece of advice, what I came up with after talking with Jeff Garland one time. I was talking about Zen and meditation and the art of stand-up comedy and this, that, and the other. And he was like, just be on stage. So I took that, and I was sitting backstage at the Funny Farm that I used to own and book and do 5 minutes on there 1,000 times. So I'm backstage thinking about this 5 minutes I'm about to do that, and I was like, wait a minute, I've done this 5 minutes or 5 minutes on the stage 100 times. Why am I so worried about the set list? Jeff says to just be. So then I say, it dawns on me that it's not about the material, it's about the moment. So focusing on the moment is key, and the material helps you create that moment. So, if during that moment you've got silence, it's okay. If you got silence after your punchline, be in the moment and reference it and keep going. If somebody drops a tray of dishes and you don't address that, that shows you're not in that moment, and it gets a disconnect from the audience. So silence is okay. One of my favorite pieces of advice I've ever heard was from Patrice O'Neill. He says, keep your jokes in your pocket and let them come out organically. When you first start off, you're going to have your set list and you're going to be doing what you're doing, but you want to get to a point where you just have your jokes in your pocket and you let them come out organically. And because you don't know what the audience is going to react, it's energy in the room, and you're changing energy every show. So, if you see the same headliner like 3 times in a weekend, it's very common to see the 95% of the same jokes, but every show is in a different order. So there's that. Now, I'm going to teach you what I've come up with on this methodology of punching up a story, how to make a story funny. A lot of people have funny stories. If you're doing comedy or thinking about comedy, you've got stories you want to tell on stage, but what's the method, how do you really punch it up? I've come up with a methodology for that after talking with a lot of comedians over the years. And the methodology is this. You just want to write your story without trying to be funny. Just get your story down on paper. And then where you want to put the humor, take that sentence and put it on a separate sheet of paper. And once that's on a separate sheet of paper, now you just work on that sentence. Write as many jokes on the subject of that sentence as possible. And then you put that sentence back into the story, and then you just repeat steps 2 through 4. Find another place in your story you want to add the funny, pull it onto a separate sheet of paper, and looking at it by itself, because that allows you to come at it from many different angles and figure out where you can find the funny on that subject. A lot of people say, what about step number 3? Well, I've come up with a methodology for that as well. The methodology is, first and foremost, it's 3 steps with 5 sub-steps. This methodology. The first step is statements of truth. That's very important because remember, we want to write from the truth. And so whatever the subject is, you write as many statements of truth on that as sentences that are true about that statement. Then the next step is you write as many, you list words associated with that subject. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, what have you. I use thesaurus.com when I'm on this step, when I'm really trying to get, dig deep. And even if I've got a good flow of my own going, once I run out of my words that I can associate it with that for the list, I still go to thesaurus.com to see if I missed anything and see if anything gives me any sparks. List is also just another way of doing mind mapping. If you know mind mapping, it's just keeping it, writing it in order instead of spreading it out. So mind mapping would work well here as well if you wanted to do that. And you're used to that. And then the third step is writing a sentence with the words from the lists from step 2. And you want to come with emotion to it. This gives you perspective. I, emotion, subject, because. Example emotions are hate, love, scared of, excited about, etc. And then what you do is you finish the sentence with the words chosen from the list on step 2. You don't have to use every single word. If you're doing the work, you're going to have 20 words associated in your lists for the associated subject in your list step. Are you really going to write 20 sentences? Yeah, that'd be great if you're going to do the work and do it. But what if you only want to do 4 or 5? You should focus on the 4 or 5 words that you want to use to finish the sentence. And I like to use hard consonant words. Look for those in the list and then finish the sentence with that. Remember, the truth is funny. And that in comedy, 80% of the rule of thumb is 80% true and 20% surprise, and the lie is a surprise. Also, another reason to do the statements of truth is it also helps just get the water flowing. Get you the hot water, get it going, get past some of the go-to stuff. We're going to use an example of this exercise with the subject of traffic. When you think about traffic, what are some statements of truth about traffic? This is what I came up with. You can hit pause and read these if you want. Then I go to the next step and I say, okay, here are the words from a list associated with traffic. And then the red check mark means those are the words that I want to finish the sentences with. I hate traffic because it makes me frustrated. Notice I'm finishing frustrated, traffic reports, gridlock. Frustrated, traffic reports, gridlock. See how I'm finishing the sentences using those words from the list? And just putting some perspective on it. I hate traffic because, and getting to all that. You can see these words, see these sentences if you want, if you hit pause. Then I change it to love. I always like to end with love because I'm going to be coming from a positive perspective on these jokes and subject matter. So now this is where you can get some sarcasm. I love traffic because I like starting my day frustrated and kind of go through it all. You can see here, you read them if you want. But then you can write these jokes here. When I think about traffic, I think about cars, gridlock, and catching them up on Facebook. I didn't use Facebook in one of the red check marks as one of my words, but I knew it from the lists because that's my truth. I know a lot of times in traffic, I'll just be on Facebook catching up on it. So there's a surprise as well. Serious, funny, but it's also based on truth. And I look forward to sitting in traffic because a sense of community you can only find in gridlock. A little bit of unknown known there. You're kind of looking around, you get kind of used to seeing the same people around you, and you're looking at other people or other cars. It is a small sense of community, in my opinion and observations. But the best part about sitting in traffic is to start my day off with a sweet smell of carbon dioxide. Solid traffic jokes. All right, so here's a formula review. Again, statements of truth, lists, I, emotion, subject, because. And those 3 steps right there, those 3 exercises put together will help you find the funny in most subjects. Do the work. Now, again, then you put your favorite sentence, apply the joke formula in a sentence. Remember to use brevity, as few words as possible. If you can turn 2 words into one, you do it. If you can turn 2 sentences into 1 sentence, you do it. Don't reveal the punch word in the setup. Preserve the funniest word till the end. Precision and brevity make a surprise ending effective. So self-deprecation is a fantastic tool in comedy because, everybody can laugh at themselves. And we're going to go over this. There's 2 types of self-deprecation. There's the obvious and the non-obvious. Obvious is what you can see. For me, I'm getting so much gray hair that people will soon think I'm Anderson Cooper's older brother. Then there's the non-obvious. My apathy sometimes causes me problems, but I don't really care. So self-deprecation has been talked about in a lot of places. Here's Forbes magazine saying that self-deprecation is disharming, makes others feel included. Again, now you're connecting with the audience. Self-deprecating humor makes people appear more likable, trusted, and caring. So again, it helps just make that connection. And so the methodology I've come up with for writing self-deprecating jokes is just like what we just did, those 3 steps, but we're going to add 2 steps to the beginning, which is write the obvious and the non-obvious, and then pick one of those traits, then the statements of truth, the list, I, emotion, subject, because. We're going to use my characteristics. Marshall Childs, I have gray hair, average height. I look like Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The non-obvious is I grew up poor, married with 2 kids. I'm scared of ending up on the wrong end of the food chain. So here are some statements of truth. I'm going to pick gray hair. You can read these as you wish. Then here's gray hair as lists. These are the words that I chose for finishing the sentences. I hate gray hair because, and you can finish, hit pause and read these if you want. Then I change it to I love gray hair because, and same thing here. But then the jokes that I come up with is, I know what most of you are thinking, so that's what Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers looks like with gray hair. I have so much gray hair, people actually think I'm Anderson Cooper's older brother. Notice too there, I could have said Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers with his shirt on, which that was the original way I wrote the joke, but then I had the gray hair joke, so I wanted to drip and lead the audience with the breadcrumb of gray hair. That's also still the surprise. So all this said and done, look, man, there's no substitution for getting on stage. Yes, professional golfers have coaches, And you can get as many golf lessons as you want, but unless you're out there swinging and hitting the ball and playing golf, you're never going to get good at it. You can master everything that we just went over, but if you don't get on stage, you're not really going to master it. So it's just, there's no substitution for getting on stage. And I know this is a lot of work to do, but this is what it takes. It's Ray Romano and Jerry Seinfeld and all those guys talked about how they, looked at writing as just part of their day job. It's 10 o'clock. It's time for me to sit down and write for 2 hours. Just like if you're an insurance adjuster, it's time for you to go out and do an insurance adjusting. So do the work of doing the writing and then getting on stage at night and doing what you needed to go on stage. There's lots of great stage time in every city these days. Stand-up comedy is on a big uptick. And I know it's a lot of work, but I'm going to leave you with this one last saying. Be so good they can't ignore you. Steve Martin. If you want to sign up for our classes that you can go over all this stuff and practice writing, and what we do is at the end of your graduation, a 6-week class, you will end up with 5 to 8 minutes of material that you can then take out around and do open mics, and to really advance your comedy writing to another level, so that when you do start getting out there and doing it, you've got a much better understanding of what's going on. You've got a much better set list than if you just started it by yourself. Yes, you can do it without taking classes. Go for it. You can also learn how to play golf without taking classes. But, it does help you out, in my opinion, hence why we do this. Plus, we want to make sure and try to influence people to do it the right way. Again, stay true to yourself, do the work, and everything will come to you, and so that you can be so good they can't ignore you. By the way, you can go to standupclasses.com if you want to register for our classes. Bye.